Well, it turns out you don't mess with Uncle Herschel. Yep, a couple weeks ago, Cracker Barrel tried to swap out its folksy old logo for a sleeker new look, and social media went ballistic and said, not having it. The backlash was so loud, and the company had already started rolling back the changes. Here to explain why it's triggered such a big emotion and to explain the power of nostalgia is friend of the show and consumer expert Morgan Ward. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Chesley.
All right, let's get to it. Why do you think the customers reacted so strongly to such what looked like a simple change?
Yeah, I think you really nailed it with your intro. Honestly, the reason that people go to Cracker Barrel is to get in touch with the nostalgia and the tradition, not only the nostalgia of their own childhood, but really the brand itself inside the stores really evokes that nostalgia with the knickknacks and the food and the design. And so I think when people sensed that that was changing, sort of the brand and the reason they go to that brand was diminished, and actually in a really threatening way for a lot of consumers, it seems.
So obviously they were trying to attract something, right? Maybe not listening to their old customers. Was that the case, or was this a failed design itself?
Well, they've been saying they were really very much in touch with their customers and were trying to respond to what their customers were demanding. I think the problem was very much that it was a startling change for a lot of customers, and that became obvious with the logo. So throughout the last 12 months, they've been changing the interior a little and trying to make things look a little more organized, a little less frenetic inside the stores. But that big change with the logo and getting rid of Uncle Herschel, I think that was the change that really threw consumers for a loop.
So you mentioned the interior designs, right? Trying to change the lighting, trying to attract more of a younger audience. What does this tell companies about making that kind of change?
I think I think that companies have to really understand not only who their consumer is, but why the consumer is going there. So for this particular brand, people weren't going there for a modern eating experience. People were going there because of the unique qualities, of having this kind of crazy walls and food that isn't always the most healthy. That's not why people were going. So changing those things and modernizing it towards those values wasn't really aligned with why consumers go to Cracker Barrel, why they love it and why they have loved it.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen things go away mainly because of technology, possibly, right? We don't all have blockbusters around. Maybe there's one left or two, right? Does nostalgia really act as a kind of currency for a brand, or especially in these uncertain economic times?
Yes, nostalgia is so important. And actually the research says that the youngest consumers are actually the most nostalgic consumers, probably because they've been living in a world that is constantly in transition and a little bit hard to predict. So when you are a brand that has this nostalgia associated with it, you are so at risk for alienating your consumers when you make even the smallest change, because people are relying on that consistency.
So now how will companies have to rethink about rolling out rebranding, or do you not do it?
I don't think you can not do it, right? You can't not change at all. And in fact, they have been making small changes, which had been going really well for their stores, because their stores had been struggling actually before this last year. But I think that you have to really figure out which parts of the change and how slowly you can introduce the change. Some brands have done this really well. Walmart, for instance, did this really well over the course of several years. It has to be small, and it has to be changes that people are going to value. For instance, maybe adding some few additions to the menu that were a little bit healthier, but not changing something as fundamental as their main character, Uncle Herschel, for instance.
Yeah, in the long run, you think this controversy will strengthen Cracker Barrel, or will expose them to the gap of brand strategy?
Well, I mean, I have heard that this is bringing a lot of attention back to their brand. And if you remember, in the world of New Coke, actually it really strengthened the brand attachment when people tried something else or were exposed to something else and then went back to the original, and they really valued the original brand even more than if they had never had that change and that threat.
Yeah, Morgan Ward, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, take care.